stay or do I go? So what will you do when the LDS Church accepts LGBT members into full fellowship in the church? Will you go back, stay as far from the church as possible, or something in between? This panel discussion will feature church leaders from groups that have already been through this journey and groups who are just starting to navigate their way through, including Affirming and Welcoming Baptists, United Church of Christ, Roman Catholics, and the LDS Church. Our panel is Jill McCrory of Affirming and Welcoming Baptists. Michael Schumacher was not able to make it, so David's taken his place. Joseph Finnegan, who we heard from last night, John Behn, Josh's father, and Andy Behn. So I've got passed out index cards and anything you might want, question you might want to ask. You know, no names necessary. Just write down what you want to ask this panel. I'll put cards and pass them to the panelists, and they can go through them. Or if you just want to ask a question, you don't have to write it on a card. Be free to ask anything you want.
Or we'll just talk.
We'll just talk.
Can we have a talking point?
Is there going to be opening statements?
Sure. So, say the name of the title of the premise of this program again.
Okay, the premise of it again is, okay, what will you do when the LDS Church accepts LGBT members into full membership in the church? Will you go back, stay as far from the church as possible, or something in between? This panel will feature the church leaders and groups that have already been through this journey and groups who are just starting to navigate their way through, including Affirming and Welcoming Baptists, United Church of Christ, Roman Catholic, and the LDS Church.
Really a great place to start because, you know, we do have to weigh the risk at hand. That is this going to be more damaging for me to participate in this church, or do they need me? And doing that, I've done a lot of work with both victims and perpetrators of domestic violence in families that want to get back together. And that question is the exact same, is weighing the benefits and the risks and what's going to happen to me and what is going to happen to my family, but making a really responsible decision predicated on those two conditions of risk and reward. Where do I belong? And I think that's going to be different for everybody. So how do people deal with that?
I would like to make a comment here. I left the church because it became very unhealthy for me to be in the church. And at the point of being ill, which I think a lot of people experience, we make ourselves ill trying to, that is when I departed from the church and had a lovely 9 years of being, married to my partner and just exploring God outside of the walls of the LDS Church and exploring my spirituality and all that. I know we've all gone on this journey. Probably why we're all here. And recently it has come to my attention. So I became a Buddhist, and then through being a Buddhist, I went back to the Mormon Church, and this was only in January. But now that I've returned, and I'm not trying to make myself straight, thank you, God, that I realized that there's such a huge need for us to do this work, to just raise awareness and be. My friend Carolani said to me, if no one left the church, if all the queers were just like, excuse me, this is hosed, what are we doing? I think the tides would change in a different direction, that people would be forced to be like, oh, this is really, it's right here? What do you mean? You? Really? Us? In Idaho? Wyoming? What? The whole thing. So, I just feel that, first off, I'm grateful to be back in the church and to be doing this work, to finally feel okay. And it's so lovely to be in a room with a bunch of people who were dealing with all my issues. But what was your original question that got me started? I don't know.
I'm not sure I had a question.
If I may, I think it actually worked well, because you are one of those people that you're talking about that it's working for you now.
Mhm.
9 years or 10 years ago, it wasn't. And so I think we're all in different places in our journeys. For some people, it may be impossible to be a voice within their own Mormon church. They may need to get out for a little while to get some space like you did. For some people, you know, you're there, you're come out, you're good, that's your personality, you can stay there, you can grapple with it, some have to come back. But I do think it's important for those who have that strength to be that voice within the congregation and within the community. But I don't want to put it on, as you said, put it on folks who aren't there to say, you have to be a voice, and people are like, oh my gosh. Barry, are you recognizing?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
wait.
Hi. I have very mixed feelings about all this, but the point I'd like to bring is that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints then as the Church of Jesus Christ. So there's the church part and there's the Jesus Christ part. So as decisions have to be made, and I understand that there's some risk and some rewards in the decision process. I remember actually what one of our members, Lenny, said in a documentary, Anyone and Everyone. And when we want to adopt, I think, a Christ-like position about this issue, we want to do it in the side of love. So I understand that at times we're angry about things. We may think that things are not working our way, that being gay in the church is not easy, that members are fighting against us, or there's some authorities that make some bold statement against gay people. But how do we act with this? And I think that what Lani said, she said in that documentary, she said, if I have to make a mistake, and obviously when you weigh the risk and the benefits, you're going to make a rational decision here, but you know that you're going to fall short of something at some point, and your decision is not going to be perfect. There's going to be some mistakes made, and I think that if you really want to make a mistake, and if you know that you're going to make a mistake, what you want to do, you want to make it on the side of love. So I think that if you want to exclude yourself from the church, I mean, it's a noble decision, but are you making a decision on the side of love? That's my question here. I think that by staying in the church, we have more to gain than by excluding ourselves from the church. I think it's a more Christ-like attitude on top of it to be within the church than to be excluding ourselves from the church. We have more to win to be in the church than to be outside the church.
If I can jump in here, I think we really need to define what we call the church. There's really different aspects to this. You have the church, which is the doctrinal, if you will, the ones that make all the policies and set the policies. You've got the community, and even within that community, you have the groups, which can be the church for us. And so we need to, I think, recognize where we're at and who we're with, and say, okay, is it really the church that's doing it to me, or is it the group that I'm doing it, that I'm with? Maybe it's just changing the group, or which group I'm with, as opposed to saying, I'm going to change the church. Now, you can't change the church, but you can certainly change your position in where you're at.
In my wording, the church would be the administration of the gospel of Jesus Christ. So, period. So what that involves is that there's a lot of principles behind it, and some of those principles are administrative principles.
Yes.
So obviously, behind those administrative principles are going to be some men making decisions. When we know that those people are making decisions that are, that fall short of perfection, we understand that the very nature of the church is not perfect. So if we stand on this ground, we can, go forward and understand that, the dealings we're going to have with the church are not going to be perfect either. So I see it that way.
I wonder, we have a real wealth of resources right here. I think that this would be a wonderful opportunity to really hear from different traditions that are further in the process than the LDS Church is, or maybe will be in our lifetime. So I would really appreciate a chance to hear from the panelists, sort of where your tradition is, or your quarter of the tradition is.
I think it's a good question, if I can respond. I work for the United Church of Christ Coalition for LGBT Concerns, which is 40 years old. The United Church of Christ is well known as a church that's very affirming of LGBT members. We have transgender and gay and lesbian and bisexual clergy who are serving parishes across the country. We have leaders of our regions who are openly gay or lesbian, so we've obviously traveled quite a journey in 40 years. But having said that, 2 points. One is that probably 80% of our congregations have not adopted a covenant affirming a welcome of LGBT members. And secondly, 40 years ago, we were exactly where you are now. There was no possibility of ordaining an openly gay or lesbian minister. And there were very few churches that were safe places for LGBT members. So our journey really started with first getting together to form a group to advocate, and you've already done that. And then secondly, we organized chapters around the country, which I think you've already done as well. So essentially, you've already taken, as far as I know, the first steps in the right direction. The local chapters are critical because when people choose to stay and they're in wards where they have to be closeted or where it's very problematic to be openly gay or lesbian, then there has to be some kind of support group. There has to be some sort of place where you can be safe and look after yourself spiritually. So I don't think I'm telling you anything you don't already know. You've already done, I think, what you need to do. My advice would be just keep on strengthening and expanding your local chapters. And secondly, for those who choose to leave, I'm a former Roman Catholic, and I never really left the Roman Catholic Church spiritually. And there are congregations, especially in New England, of our denomination, where up to 50 to 60% of the members are former Roman Catholics who left the church for one reason or another. And we've discovered 2 things from that experience. One is that unless you're totally alienated, you never stop being a Roman Catholic. There's something about that experience, about that tradition that has nurtured you as much as it may have harmed you. And you have a right to claim that, even if your journey takes you into a different tradition or a different denomination. And I feel that way strongly about myself. The second is that former Roman Catholics enrich the United Church of Christ. They bring a liturgical tradition, an emphasis on Holy Communion. And our churches are just stronger and spiritually deeper because of the influx of Catholics. I would say the same is true of the LDS Church. If you find that it's not spiritually safe for you to stay where you are and you leave, I suspect that you'll never stop being a Latter-day Saint. And I also suspect that you will have gifts to bring from your tradition into the traditions that you explore. And then hopefully, God willing, you'll be able to come back. And then a final point, I'm talking too much, I apologize. But a final point is I have a vested interest in you staying. And that is, I believe very strongly there should be no church, no faith community, no institution in our society where LGBT people aren't fully accepted and supported. And so I'm looking forward, as much as you are, I think, to the day when the LDS Church will be like the United Church of Christ, a place where the gifts that you have to bring are fully affirmed, including your gifts from ministry. I really do pray for that day.
It's interesting. He's a Roman Catholic that went to the United Church of Christ. I was the United Church of Christ that went to the Roman Catholic Church and then to the Mormon Church. So I figure if I join enough religions, I'll have a day. One of the things that strike me is with the LDS Church, we're already behind the 8 ball, because no matter where we get, it's going to change in 7 years. Because they change every 7 years. Every 5 to 7 years, the bishop changes by design, and every 10 years, the stake president changes by design. So as you've built things, it's going to change, and the flavor of every ward is different based upon the leaderships. And I can tell you, having been a bishop, by the way, I'm a New England bishop, not a Utah bishop. There's a difference. Like Southern Baptist versus sometimes they consider me a radical Mormon, but we need to recognize that the church is going to change, and where we are at in the moment is where we can make a difference. And I found that's to be true, that you can make a difference with the people that are there. You're not going to change the hierarchy, they're not inviting me up to Salt Lake to talk to the 12. Though it's interesting, a dear stake president of mine ended up being up in the quorum of the 70, and now he's the temple president. He used to sit there and tell everybody that we're all rascals, every one of us. So I enjoyed his philosophy of where he was coming from. But the church does have, for us, it's not going to change, but there's other institutions, other churches that have a far better chance of, if we can get them to change, that it can stick. Which is my concern, is that if the LDS Church, if we make some changes, it won't stick, because within 7 years it's different for that sort of locality.
Well, as I shared, when we talk about Baptists, it's not one pot, it's, several different pots. But in all of those, other than the Alliance, which is a new breed of Baptists and the most liberal, it has been, as my colleague from UCC, it has been years. I mean, we were where you are, especially in the Southern Baptist Convention, the Southern Baptist churches, and to an extent in the American Baptist churches, and we are still there in the African American churches, Baptist churches. They are as difficult as, and quite often are duly aligned Southern Baptist and National Baptist. So we're still there, but what we found, again, is that working from within, as this leadership looks out to who is in their congregation, and they hear more and more, they hear, "Pastor, I am gay." And we tell true stories of families, and they see that we're people and there's families, and that this just isn't one renegade person, that becomes a stronger and stronger message. I think what you say about the leadership and the flavor of the leadership, I think it's important to look at that the flavor of that leadership is going to be influenced by who's in the pews. And if the flavor of the membership, of the leadership, starts reflecting who's in the pews, and if we have gay folk in the pews, that's going to, again, it isn't going to happen tomorrow, but there's a reason that Eugene Peterson is a bishop in the Episcopal Church right now. That didn't happen overnight, but it started to reflect who was in the Episcopal Church, and he came up within that. We have people within the general councils and general committees of the American Baptist Convention who are out and gay, even though the American Baptist Convention still has on its books that homosexuality is inconsistent with scriptural teaching, because they have taken that step to be involved in that convention and be out. And so the more and more people we have in that, the more and more people see that, yeah, we're here. So I do think that we're still not there. We're still not there. I've got a Baptist church in Washington, D.C. Now, you would think in Washington, D.C., it's easy to be gay and Baptist. But in Washington, D.C., we've got an African American church that has just recently joined now duly aligned with the Baptists and the UCC, that when they did a Holy Union, they're in Anacostia, and when they did a Holy Union, they lost half their congregation. Half their congregation walked out. And you know what that means, not only for the obviously the tithing of the church, but just the feeling, the family feeling of the church, that half the folks you know have just walked out, and they want to take you with them. But what's happened is that the folks in that church were so centered and focused on, this is what Jesus Christ has called us to. This is we are the other, and we're going to welcome the other. That now they have brought like-minded people in, and they've grown the congregation again. So I do think it's a long and it's hard, but we found that the best was to be in their midst and work in their midst.
Thank you. So as a Community of Christ member, I guess we're sort of the more liberal branch of Latter-day Saints in one respect. But it's been a difficult process for gay people as well, such as myself. And my mom was just telling me the other day when she was sitting in church that when she looked around, she was just really amazed, like, there's so many people within her church that have gay members, and there's so many gay family members, and that it's just kind of a crime that it's taking so long within my church. And I personally have just sort of stepped back from the church because we have World Conference every 4 years, and we vote on issues, and at the last conference that we had, the gay agenda was voted on, and the gay people lost, like always. The vote is whether we're able to hold a position within our priesthood, and because we're gay, we're not allowed to be priesthood members. And so I just think that I just look at people, and it's just kind of weird to sit in a room and have people think that I don't have some kind of a connection to God simply because I'm gay. So that sort of has been a deciding factor, as I'm sure for a lot of you, to just, I don't know, just kind of step back. I think a lot of it for my church is a generational gap. A lot of old people, I don't mean to say it like that, but we get stuck in, I'm old too, but people get stuck in their belief systems, and they don't want that to be upset. And I know with my church, when we allowed women into the priesthood, we did lose a considerable amount of people. And it did take a big financial toll on the church. And it's been a process to come back from that. But for me, we're still working on it. I have a lot of gay Community of Christ member friends that stay within the church. They're very active in their churches, and as everybody has said, it's sort of a church thing, whether they're accepting or not. Obviously, my church is centered out of Missouri, Independence, and so the more you get towards that, the more conservative it seems to be. But living in California where I live, a lot of the churches are more liberal and are very welcoming, obviously, of gay and lesbian, bisexual, transgender, intersex, questioning people. So it's sort of where I'm at and where my church is at. So I know we'll come up for a vote. The gay people will come up for a vote again, and eventually it will pass. But, you know, it leaves a sour taste in your mouth, at least in my mouth, and you know, I'm sort of on that fence. Do I go back or don't I go back? And that's why it's interesting. This is a great panel for me. It's good to hear everybody's point of view. That's my speech.
I don't know, it's good to have so many fellow church hoppers on the panel. And I think in the community here, LDS is known for its missionary work and bringing people in. So I think a lot of LDS people come from different traditions, and that's certainly admirable and respectful. And I really like what you guys said about, you know, keeping your traditions and bringing in, you know, the gifts of people who come from other faith backgrounds. And that's, I don't know, I'm finding myself being very emotional at this entire conference. This is one of those times. But I think that the Catholic Church is quite different from the LDS Church in that we don't get to vote. It's our authorities make those decisions and pass them down to the laity. I'm being sarcastic, of course. In the Catholic Church, it's thought that there is a tremendous amount of dialogue going on the level of the bishops in Rome, And that conversation is going on, but we, the laity, don't get to hear about it until they have one, doctrine, one Episcopal letter that will come down from probably the Pope that will say, what we believe, and then we all, try and see if we can, connect our personal experience and beliefs to the encyclical. But I know that conversation is definitely going on in the local church. In Seattle, it has historically been a very liberal Catholic church, and there's a lot of very open gay priests, and those priests are not alone. There are some not open gay priests, and then there's a lot of heterosexual priests who are listening to the call of the people. I know very well thousands of priests, and there is not one of them that doesn't take very seriously their duty as shepherd of a parish community. And it hurts them tremendously that people leave the church because of gay issues, because of any issue. But they take that as a personal failure. And I've had kind of my own experience of being in the church in a monastery and kind of having some time off. After I left the monastery, I took about a year off, kind of like Tina said, to kind of, I didn't know I was doing it at the time, but I think what I was doing was building up myself as a gay person. And now I can come back to the Catholic Church with that strength and to be able to talk to people. And as a counselor, I do a lot of work with gay people, and I've started doing like marriage prep for gay couples who are preparing for civil union and marriage, and that's just wonderful and amazing. And one of the things I tell my religious friends, both Catholic and non-Catholic, is that because of the separation that the church administrations of various denominations have done to kick out their gay people, is they're coming into their marriages and their civil unions ill-prepared. And so I tell them, that I just met with a Catholic couple, and they're getting married, and I did the marriage prep that you should be doing. And I try not to be too insulting, because usually they cry when I say that. I try to be very gentle with them, but I want them to know that what I'm doing as a counselor, and as a spiritual counselor, spiritual psychotherapist, is work that the church should be doing, and will get back into doing once they've gotten over their feelings of ick at the gay issue. Once they figure out that it's a normal manifestation of human existence and a condition of God's beautiful creative experience, then it'll be different. But right now, other people are doing their job, and I think that's definitely happening with LDS people, is that they're going elsewhere for their spiritual needs.
It's interesting. My spiritual advisor is not LDS. My spiritual, I have a good friend who happens to be a Methodist minister, and interesting background. I mean, he was a Jehovah's Witness, and then he became a Methodist, and his mother disowned him because he was Methodist, but he was also an alcoholic. It was all right to be an alcoholic, but you can't be a Methodist. So we've had a lot of talk, and he just came from from the Methodist regional convention, where they brought up the issue of same-sex marriage and gays in the ministry. And they're going forward with they don't know, he's not sure of the wording for the marriage yet. They are definitely going forward saying, yeah, I think we can consider having gays in the ministry. I don't know about marriage, but that's a moot point. And I asked him point blank, I said, what would you do if they passed the law and a couple came to you? And he stopped and sat back. He says, I don't know, because I don't know what I would do for my church.
That's a really important point as we go through this journey for all of us, is that we have to remember that as legislation, not only church legislation, but national and state legislation is being changed, that many of our churches, no matter what church we are, they don't know how to handle, they don't know how to deal with the legislation once it's passed. So not only gay marriage, but transgender rights and accommodations, anything that has to do with our community, that a church says, well, you know, most churches will say, well, we don't have transgender people. We all do. Most of our churches are looking for someone who is dressing differently and is looking different, and they say, oh, that might, and it's like, no. You have gay people, you have transgender people, you have bisexual people, you have intersex people, you just may not know it. So there are many of us out there that are actually starting to take steps right now in forming interfaith organizations, and we've just done this in Maryland, to start bringing resources into churches for the legislation that's going to be passed, not only church-wise, but state-wise. So that when they do that, that we can go out to the Methodists and say, here's how you grapple with this. So there's that piece too of how do you help the LDS Church position itself for the change that may come. You know, what is the LDS Church doing in New York now? You know, how do you position them for someone?
Well, there's the exclude, I mean, there's a separation of church and state, and the church is always excluded.
There is,
From the-
except that we need to prepare them for what, and so right now the answer may be to any brave gay couple that comes to an LDS authority and says we want to be married, that right now, of course, the answer is going to be we don't recognize you as being, but that will, people are going to continue to push that envelope. There are people out there that will continue to push this envelope to say, we have a right here and we'd like to be married in the church.
I'd just like to come back to our beginning premise of our session here. We've talked a lot about how churches are going to change, and that change will come by people staying. But really what we wanted to start out talking about is, do I stay or go? I really appreciated the comment that you made about every person has the right for spiritual sustenance, or the need for it. We need to find it. The interesting thing about Mormonism that's very similar with Catholicism is that if you were to draw a graph of how we identify our spirituality, you'd have, here's me, here's the church, and here is God. Everything about God and everything I know about spirituality is mediated through the church. And if the church is telling me I'm no good, I'm this, I'm that, or the other, I've run into a place where I feel shut out from God. No wonder then that the suicide rate in Utah in particular among young men ages 18 to 23 is higher than anywhere in the nation, because we've run into this. So there are no open and affirming Mormon wards. There's barely a group like Affirmation or like Family Fellowship, which are such important groups because they have begun this work. What people have to do, I think it was Tina who was saying, we find ourselves the courageous people sometimes leave. And maybe they leave for a time because they're worn, because there has been no spiritual sustenance. And we have battle fatigue, as it were. And so I think it's an important thing to recognize that we do need to have spiritual peace. I left the Mormon church, and I did because I got to a place where every Sunday was combat duty. I came home so worn and so distressed and so upset. It took me a week to recover, and then the process started again. I can remember the time when, for the last time, I sat across in a bishop's office and listened to what he had to say, and something clicked inside of me, and I thank God for it, because I thought, never again. I am never going to sit in this one-down position again. I'm going to own my spirituality. And I left. And I had some remarkable experiences, and I don't want to take too much time, just as a quick comment, but I happened to be working at a Presbyterian church as a Mormon woman in the nursery school. And I went to church there sometimes secretly because I was looking for a place where I could just be away. And I happened to be there on the day when the minister in that church announced to the congregation he had a gay son. Audible gasps in the church, and I happened to be sitting there as the mother of a gay son. I made an appointment to go see that man. It's probably one of the scariest things I ever did. I was in the Relief Society. In fact, I'm trying to think if I was still in the Relief Society presidency at the time. But anyway, here I am making an appointment, not with anybody in the Mormon church, because they totally wouldn't understand. But I went to see him, and I remember standing in the hallway of the Presbyterian church saying, am I really doing this? I'm going in to meet with the minister of the Presbyterian church because nobody gets this. But he will. And feeling what a remarkable experience that was for me that day, to sit with that minister who welcomed me. I'll still be very emotional about it. To feel the Spirit of God and to find out, whoa, it isn't just in the Mormon church. God is at work everywhere. This remarkable truth, God is at work everywhere. And now that I know that, and I know that I'm okay with God, that God is okay with me, now maybe I can think about going back. Maybe not. Maybe my journey is going to take me somewhere else. But the right to be spiritually fed, to know that God loves me exactly as I am, not that I might be perfect one day, exactly as I am, those wonderful truths that many Mormons do without.
They're not lucky enough to have the gay experience or the experience of being on the outside
So,
to learn that.
how each
that you
person
are-
grapples with
you're
that.
lucky.
The few that are sitting here today, what a lucky thing.
Yes.
I'm very moved by the
It's
fact
true.
that there's a lot
It's
of
true.
gay
Why
men
not?
and lesbian women who sit every Sunday in Mormon church despairing. And so we ask ourselves the question, is it my time maybe to go back if we've left? To say, maybe it is my time, maybe not, maybe it's someone else's time. But we share the spiritual gifts we have when we get strong, when we get clear about our spirituality and get strong. But the right to be spiritually fed, to know that God loves me exactly as I am, not that I might be perfect one day, exactly as I am, those wonderful truths that many Mormons do without.
They're not lucky enough to have the gay experience or the experience of being on the outside
So,
to learn that.
how each
that you
person
are-
grapples with
you're
that.
lucky.
The few that are sitting here today, what a lucky thing.
Yes.
I'm very moved by the
It's
fact
true.
that there's a lot
It's
of
true.
gay
Why
men
not?
and lesbian women who sit every Sunday in Mormon church despairing. And so we ask ourselves the question, is it my time maybe to go back if we've left? To say, maybe it is my time, maybe not, maybe it's someone else's time. But we share the spiritual gifts we have when we get strong, when we get clear about our spirituality and get strong.
Grateful for everything that's been said, because having come out to the church leadership 33 years ago, I've had quite the roller coaster ride within the community of Christ. The biggest thing that people keep saying, why in the world are you still here? And I keep responding, there's a fool born every day. And the president of the church, Steve Easy, about fell out of his chair laughing when I said that. He said, you know, you've dealt with this more than anyone else in the church. He says, why? I said, very simply, I've had so many experiences through the years where people have come up and said, if it hadn't been for you being out there fighting, I couldn't have come out today. Or a parent saying, I've watched you for years, thank you, because my child is safe because of you. All the hurt, all the anger, all the pain I get from a congregation over the years, it all goes away when someone says thank you. Where I get my strength is I yell at God a lot. We have a really volatile relationship. But the nice thing is he uses a baseball bat. And he says, you got work to do. Get out there and do it. I come to the gala event, which is equivalent to affirmation, to get really supercharged, to go back for another year to go out and face the congregations. I'm lucky in my congregation, I'm actually the pastor. I have been openly gay in the church, gosh, for 20-some years. When I go around the country, I walk in the church, and just to walk in, and I introduce myself. Oh, I know who you are. Okay. That's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. The other thing that I do, I promote even within the gala group, ministry of presence. If you do nothing more than sit in your church, you are a ministry of presence. I usually make sure that somewhere I have a rainbow on. People say, well, you're broadcasting. I said, no, I'm not. I'm not broadcasting. I'm giving a lifeline to someone in that church who is looking for someone. I finally got our straight allies to start doing the same thing, put a rainbow on, because you never know who in that room needs to know. They may take 6, 7, 8 months, 2 years, but they may finally come up and we talk. And you just never know. In our world conferences for years, people walk out, oh, you're back again. I say, back here. And these people will just beat on me with the Bible and everything else. And my response to that is, thank you for sharing. And I drop it. I don't get into a battle. This last time, this guy who's been there probably for 15 of our conferences over the years, and I can expect him within 10 minutes of our booth opening, he's going to be beating on me. And as I walked up the steps to the auditorium, boom, who do I see? There's Gerald. And I just smiled, and he came up and he said, you're here again. I said, yes, I am. And he said, I need a challenge. I about fell off the steps. Stop beating on me. I need a challenge. Ministry of presence. And that's what I promote. People within Gala, and I share stories every time we get together about, gosh, this really was exciting. This really was good. And they're going, why do you have all these things that are positive? I said, well, one, I go to church. Well, I can't go. I don't feel safe there. I understand that. But if we all keep backing up and backing up and backing up, people don't have the face to the issue. And that's one of the things our church leaders have learned. We can talk and talk and talk, but if there's no face with this group of people you're talking with, they don't get it. So now I travel sometimes with the apostles. They put my face to the issue. It's not easy. It's not easy to share the story, the hurt, the pain of over the years. But when I start getting to my lowest points, where I say, okay, I'm done with this journey, somebody comes out of the work and says, thank you, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be here. Okay, that's my boost to get back in there and keep fighting. I've been in that roller coaster to the pit of wanting to kill myself, and God wouldn't let me. He brought me up, he introduced me back to the church, where, for whatever good or bad, I'm here. And like I told the president at one time when he was challenged, I told him one time that pretty much in his face, almost using the F word, he saw me a few weeks later and he says, you're still here? And I said, yeah, you're stuck. And which is part of the story in that one book. So anyway, my biggest thing, I guess, for those, do I stay? I can't answer that except for the fact that as painful as it gets, there's some pretty darn good experiences when you put yourself out there, sharing, if nothing more, this is who I am, people, I'm going to love you, this is my church. Someone else is going to be growing from you in the future.
Thank you, Barry. I come from a widely diverse background. As an infant, I was baptized in an evangelical and Reformed congregation. Grew up in a Lutheran congregation. Joined the LDS Church when I was 20. Stayed a member of the LDS Church for 40 years, with side trips through spiritualism, Episcopalian, and I got touched by a Unitarian Universalist minister who later became the third president of the UUA. About 12, 13 years ago, I was district clerk in the district presidency, where I sat with a man, district president, who was also the church architect in our area. And I saw this man juggling sacrament meeting attendance figures on the island on which I live to enable him to turn a Phase 1 chapel into a Phase 2.5 chapel, and then, as soon as that was past the point of no return, juggle the figures again in a way that allowed him to say to Indianapolis, where physical facilities for the area was headquartered, oh, we've got to build another chapel, which means we've got to buy property. In New York, property doesn't come cheap. And they did it. And in the meantime, we need to make $50,000 worth of leasehold improvements on a building we're renting from one of the members. And I got so turned off by the way this district president, church architect, was juggling his two jobs back and forth to, just to build things, that I stopped attending church. I was still carrying out, functions of the district clerk, but I had no taste for what was going on in the church. And finally, I asked to be released. And I was. And about this time, my now ex-wife had handed a letter of resignation to our then branch president, and he sat on it for 9 months until she called him out on it when she saw a new branch list. She had served him twice as a Relief Society president, and he knew this was a woman you don't fool around with, so to speak. And so he sent her resignation into Member and Statistical Records.
We have to finish this session.
Yes, I know. The point is, for those of us who are here, the question is, what do I do now? That depends on the situation in which you are in. Is your bishop or branch president, is your stake president hard-nosed? Does he, when Salt Lake says, this is the position, does he say, which foot do I step off with first? Or does he say, yeah, okay, and then do what he feels is right for his jurisdiction? A man who was first counselor in the district presidency when I was clerk is now the stake president after having become the bishop of what became my ward. And I understand from Tina that he is willing to make one of the buildings in the stake available for a chapter of affirmation to meet. All right, this is an educated, intelligent man. We have come a long way in our stake with him as stake president, if that's the case. The predecessor was not either of those things, though he was a licensed architect. It looks like things are looking up in New York City for LGBT Mormons, but it depends on where you are today in terms of your personal journey and the church, how you answer the question to stay or go. For me, at the time, going was the thing to do because I was perpetually the square peg trying to fit into the round hole. And it was, 10 years of psychotherapy with some LDS people, with others, like the notorious Charles Socarides, briefly, and one of his disciples. I finally learned to accept myself as a gay man. And from there, I met my fiance, who's here today with me, and we built a life together, and we joined a Unitarian Universalist congregation, which has been a wonderful opportunity for me to use my talents, my intellect, and grow much further while serving a congregation that sees the world as it is, an imperfect place, and try to improve it through the various ministries that we have. You have to make this decision for yourself to stay or go based upon where you are personally and where you are in relation to the LDS Church. And my answer isn't going to fit you. You have to find your own answer, which means you have to become an individual who is comfortable in his or her own skin. And that's the message I think that a number of people have been making in this room today. It is an individual decision, and we can't, I can only suggest that this worked for me. You have to get to know yourself, be comfortable with yourself, and then move from there.
Thank you.